Next thing, so inflation, we talked about it, what's been happening. Consumers are feeling financial pressure. Why are they feeling it? Two reasons, and not just high inflation, but most countries, I think Turkey is excluded and Russia is excluded, but most countries, when COVID happened, had kicked in government subsidies. So, for example, in the US, student loans were frozen for repayment. You didn't need to repay student loans. People were getting money just for being taxpayers. They just were getting money from the government just to stay on board, to financial help. And this was going on for a few years. And right now it's either disappeared completely or nearly gone. And so these are two drivers. One is high inflation, but the second one is, of course, the reduction in government subsidies. And so if we look at specific things that are happening, how the consumers are reacting to this inflation pressure and reduction in government spending, they are specifically, if we take Americans earning between 50 and 100,000 a year, they were polled and they said we were worried or somewhat worried about the price of goods, and they confirmed that they will continue to cut spending for the rest of the year, this year. And they already drastically cut back on essential items like groceries, which is affecting all of us, and gas, as well as non-essential goods like entertainment and clothes. So they actually cutting down on expenses all around. And in US, there's a famous concept, many of you may know this, it's called dollar stores. It doesn't mean that all products there cost $1. Historically, they used to cost $1, but now they cost more, but they still convey this very discounter image of many things, including food. And visits to dollar stores among individuals with household incomes of 100,000 or more are increasing. They increased 4% this year, and 45% of these households now shop at dollar stores. So that's a big signal that almost half of the people earning more than 100,000 in the US are shopping in very, very budgety stores. It's like, it's not even like Lidl or Aldi. It's more discounter look and feel than that. So this is what's happening. Consumers are voting with their feet and their wallets and changing their behavior. And we see it not just in America. This is an example of French food spending in the last 16 years. All was going very well, obviously a bit of small inflation, etc. And then what happens? Inflation is going up, temporarily spending is going up over here, and then it falls off a cliff. So it was as high as 17 billion per month of euro. Now it's up to as low as 14. It's a very drastic cut in expenses. So it's happening not just in US, it's happening in other countries in the world. People are reducing their expenses. So what do retailers do? Retailers are stuck between so-called rock and a hard place, because they have to sell, they have to grow their sales, but they have customers who want to spend less. So retailers are listening to customers and understanding what their consumers are thinking, what's hurting them the most, and addressing that with anti-inflation promos. I went to Poland because Poland for me is a very good place to see the trends. It's very highly competitive retail market. Poland is large so it's big economy. At the same time, Polish consumers are very demanding. So when I worked in Poland, when I worked at Tesco, I spent a lot of time there. So for our session, I actually visited Poland to see the market, and I took a few pictures, and I'll show them along the way. This is one couple of them first, and you can see that Carrefour, which is one of the more successful retailers in Poland, one of the larger hypermarkets, uh, launched anti-inflation promo, and basically they trying to help customers to save money because customers are feeling the inflation. Carrefour in France, as I mentioned at the bottom, added an anti-inflation button on its website that shows customers cheaper alternatives to products, often pointing them to own brand groceries. This is the key here. We'll go to own brand in a second. So retailer not only saying, here's anti-inflation promo, we have some reductions. They come to you as a supplier, they come to other producers and say, give us some anti-inflation promo. They also say, we got to push our private label because that's addressing the need customers have the most right now to save money. And so that's what's been happening. An interesting test case, I included that. I think it's absolutely fascinating. It shows behavior of companies and reaction of consumers. This is a Clorox, very famous company, makes a lot of things in the world, uh, lots of chemical products, makes uh, cat litter products, one of the leading brands in the world. At the same time, it also makes Kingsford charcoal, thing you use for grilling. And here's an example that they raised their prices early this year. Well, obviously, they wanted to make it more profitable for themselves. And they also include raised prices on Kingsford, their charcoal brand. And of course, they raised it before the grilling season. Grilling season in America about 3 months most of the time. It starts at end of May, finishes about actually yesterday it finished because it was Labor Day in the States. So competitors, including store brands at retailers like Walmart, didn't increase prices as fast. And you can see that Kingsford 3.65 kilo, it's 8 pounds, was costing 7.92 in Walmart. But at the same time, for nearly the same price, a little less, you can buy double the size of Walmart's private label charcoal. It's called Expert Grill. It's even a nice name for it. They knew how to call their private label. And so what happened? In the grilling season, consumers bought cheaper brands instead, and Kingsford lost market share drastically. Now, of course, following the story, brand is working with retailers, this is their quote, to better feature the product in stores, given half of Kingsford annual sales happen in 3 months through the end of June. So grilling season, I said, ends about now, but people buy charcoal beforehand and save it and use it later. So companies' explanations that they're just covering their costs didn't work with the consumers. And in general, it doesn't work very well with companies just raise prices however they think they can. It doesn't work with consumers anymore. Consumers push back. And here you can see a recent survey found that 80% of consumers think that companies are using inflation as an excuse to hike prices beyond their real cost increases. And this is a big issue, and we'll address that in the next slides. And it's called greedflation. We talked about shrinkflation. We'll talk about greedflation in a few minutes. But let's see what's happening. Yeah. First, before we talk about greedflation details. So CPG prices are still going up, and it leads to profit growth. At the same time, we realized that, as we saw in previous slides, that price increases relief should be near because inflation is not as high, because consumers are pushing back. And you can see here a number of points. Obviously, there were reasons, and we'll talk in more detail later about it. So first, companies raised prices, and there were reasons: energy, inflation, supply chain disruptions. We probably know them all, or at least heard most of them. But at the same time, we see that, for example, Kellogg's and PepsiCo raised their full year forecasts as a result of price hikes. So there's no miracle, yeah. You don't just do naturally better in percent terms of your sales because you just not raising prices higher than your cost base. So clearly, there's a bit of extra price increases. And there's an opinion here of Chris Becker that he doesn't think that customers will allow companies to get away with big price increases, and we see that some categories such as margarine, flour, bread, and sugar have seen significant price increases. But my point here is that it's improving, and the last two examples that other categories such as bacon, whole milk, citrus fruit have seen some price relief, and even eggs, which was a big story in America earlier this year, where price just gone up so high. It was as much as $5 a dozen, which in America is very high. By May, it came down to 2.67. So there is a quite optimistic forecast on price decreases as well. Let's talk more about greedflation. It's a bit of heavy slide, but I felt we should. It will be very useful for us to get to get more detail around it. First point is that market Life Pulse survey. It's Bloomberg's professional survey of professional retail investors from different countries. They polled 288 people. 90% of them said that companies on both sides of Atlantic have been raising prices in excess of their own costs since the pandemic began in 2020. So this is experts talking. This is not just your average Joe and consumer who says, "Oh, I think they're unfair." These are professional people who are investing into retailers and suppliers. Yeah? And here's the block I included from Paul Donovan. I think it's very cool how he breaks it down, what's been happening. He works at UBS Global Wealth Management. He's their chief economist. He sees there were three distinct inflation waves that we all gone through. So it's not just, inflation. Let's get to the bottom of it. There was the first wave, and this was more about consumer durable goods, and it was demand-led. So what happened is governments gave out money, people were staying in at home during lockdowns, and interest rates were near zero, and people were spending more, and they wanted to buy more. We all know very well, if demand goes up, the prices will go up because there's just not enough product at that lower price anymore, and we need to pull in more expensive product, and then the average price goes up. So that first wave, it's over because durable goods prices are decreasing. Second wave of inflation was caused by the energy shock, and that came from the war in Ukraine. Natural gas and oil prices, probably remember how it went up, and because Russia invading Ukraine and has a big share in energy, energy exporter. Again, these prices have dropped dramatically. The price of gas and oil is a bit expensive, but gas now is very low. And third wave is what we're going through now, is the unusual part that Paul Donovan mentions. It's a profit-led inflation story. And this occurs where firms toward the end of supply chain, consumer-facing companies, which are retailers, and near consumer-facing companies, producers, so increase margins, but stating it's all due to costs and other factors. Mostly it's about manufacturers we're talking about. And that's what's been happening right now, and there is a pushback. So to prove that point, you can see that rise in retail profits as a share of GDP. Retail profits surged 86% between the first quarter of 2020 and the fourth quarter of 2022, while GDP rose roughly 20%. And this is, according to Paul Donovan, is all consumer-facing greedflation. This is what it is. When companies unjustifiably raise their prices even more than they have to. And I'm not here to blame the companies. I'm not here to judge them. I'm just here stating how the world sees it, and we need to understand it so we can deal with that. The profit-led inflation is now coming under pressure, and this, of course, puts pressure on the margins of retail and suppliers. It can also be damaging to reputation, because if the company is accused of profiteering and it gets to the heads of consumers, it can affect the sales, of course. So just to be a bit balanced here, there's a point that I wanted to mention just to show the other side of the opinion that according to David Beckworth, he's a senior research fellow in George Mason University and former economist for the US Treasury Department. He doesn't feel as much that it's profit-led. He appeals to the fact that it's higher demand, just like it happened in the first wave of inflation. And that's what's causing consumers' prices to go up now, and not greed of corporations. So I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, but wanted to make list both points for you, so you know there is a bit of that other side opinion that also exists.